There was a man who woke up every morning at exactly 6:30, not because he had somewhere important to be, not because anyone was waiting for him, but because he believed that successful people woke up early. So he did the same. He lived in a small apartment on the third floor of an old building. The paint on the walls had begun to fade. The window did not close properly, and when the wind came at night, it made a soft whistling sound that felt lonely. Still, every morning he made his bed carefully. He ironed his shirt, he polished his shoes, then he stood in front of the mirror, and for a few quiet seconds, he looked at himself as if he were looking at someone else. Today, he would whisper, "I will act like a successful man." The truth was, he had lost his job almost a year ago. At first, and he told himself it was temporary, just a few weeks, maybe a month. But time passed, weeks became months, and slowly, people stopped calling, friends became busy, colleagues moved on. Even the messages in his phone became quiet. But he never told anyone, not his family, not his neighbors, not even the landlord who sometimes asked gently, "Everything okay these days?" He would smile, "Yes, just busy with work." And in a way, he wasn't lying, because every day he worked very hard, not at a company, but at becoming someone else. After getting dressed, he would leave the apartment at 7:30, always at the same time, always with the same calm expression. He would walk down the stairs, nod politely to anyone he saw, and step out into the street like a man with a destination. Then he would walk, and sometimes for 30 minutes, sometimes for an hour, until he reached a cafe, not a fancy one, just a quiet place with wooden chairs, soft music, and large windows that let the morning light in. He chose that cafe carefully because it looked like a place where successful people might sit. He always ordered the same thing: black coffee, no sugar. He didn't actually like it that much, but he believed that successful people drank coffee like that: strong, simple, no distractions. So he trained himself to enjoy it, or at least to pretend. He would sit near the window, take out his laptop, open it slowly, and then begin his performance, typing, scrolling, reading. Sometimes he wasn't doing anything real, just moving his fingers, just staring at the screen, just trying to look important. If someone walked by, they would see a focused man working quietly in the morning light. They would not see the emptiness behind the screen. They would not hear the silence in his life. And strangely, that made him feel better. Because for a few hours each day, he could forget the truth. For a few hours each day, he could live inside a story he created. A story where he was not lost. A story where he was moving forward. A story where he mattered. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And still, he continued, every morning, every step, every small detail, carefully repeated, like a ritual, like a quiet promise to himself. "I am not giving up." One morning, something different happened. He arrived at the cafe as usual, ordered his coffee, sat by the window, opened his laptop. But before he could begin pretending, someone spoke to him. "Excuse me," a voice said gently. He looked up. A woman stood beside his table. She looked around his age, simple clothes, kind eyes, a little hesitant, but not afraid. "Do you mind if I sit here?" she asked. "The other tables are full." He glanced around. There were indeed many people that morning, more than usual. He nodded. "Of course." She smiled. "Thank you." She sat down across from him, placed her bag beside her chair, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. He returned his eyes to the screen, trying to continue his routine, trying to act normal, but something felt different because now someone was watching, not directly, but close enough to notice. He typed a little faster, clicked a few tabs, and opened a document he didn't understand, just to look busy, just to maintain the image. A few minutes passed, then she spoke again. You come here every morning, don't you? His fingers froze for a second. He looked up slowly. Yes, he said. I do. She nodded. I thought so. I've seen you before. He felt a small tension in his chest. Seen him? For how long? What had she noticed? Do you work nearby? She asked. The question was simple, but for him, it felt heavy. This was the moment he had been rehearsing every day, the moment where the story had to continue. He smiled, a calm, confident smile. Yes, he said, I work in consulting. It was the same answer he always used. Safe, vague, believable. She seemed impressed. Oh, she said softly. That sounds important. He nodded, and just slightly. It keeps me busy. She smiled again, and for some reason, her smile felt real. Not like the polite smiles he gave to others, not like the practiced expressions he wore every day. This one felt warm. I'm trying to build something of my own, she said. A small business. He tilted his head. What kind of business? She hesitated, then laughed a little. I'm not sure yet. I just know I don't want to go back to the job I had before. There was something honest in her voice, something unpolished, something real. He wasn't used to that. Most conversations he had were short, surface level, safe, but this felt different. Do you have a plan? He asked. She shook her head. Not really. Just ideas and hope. He looked at her for a moment, then back at his screen, then at his coffee. Black, bitter, familiar. I think that's enough, he said quietly. She looked surprised. Really? He nodded. Yes. Sometimes, starting without a perfect plan is better than waiting forever. He didn't know why he said that. Maybe because he needed to hear it himself. Maybe because, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just pretending. He was speaking, honestly. She smiled again, a little brighter this time. I like that, she said, starting before you feel ready. They sat in silence for a while after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. And something inside him began to shift, just a little, like a door opening, very slowly. He didn't realize it yet, but that morning was the first crack in the life he'd been pretending to live. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Just one moment. Just one real conversation. Just one person who sees you. Not the version you show the world, but the one you hide and accepts it without asking you to be anything else. He took another sip of his coffee, still bitter, but somehow not as hard to swallow. Outside, the city moved as usual, people rushing, cars passing, life continuing. But inside the cafe, something quiet and important had begun. Not success, not yet, but something deeper, something more real, the beginning of becoming. The next morning, he woke up at 6:30 again. The same quiet room, the same pale light coming through the window, the same soft sound of the wind slipping through the broken frame. But something felt slightly different, not outside. Everything outside was exactly the same. But inside him, there was a small movement, a quiet awareness, as if something had been touched the day before and had not yet returned to its place. He sat on the edge of his bed for a moment. Usually, he would stand up quickly, move with purpose. follow the routine without thinking. But today he paused. He thought about the woman, her voice, her honesty, the way she said, "I'm not sure yet." It stayed with him because he had not said those words to anyone, not once, not in all these months. Instead, he had said things like, "I'm busy. Work is good. Everything is fine." Simple sentences, clean, safe, and completely untrue. He stood up slowly, made his bed, ironed his shirt, polished his shoes, every movement still careful, still precise, but not as automatic as before, because now he was aware that this was not just a routine. It was a performance, and for the first time, he could see the stage. When he stood in front of the mirror, he looked at himself longer than usual. His eyes did not look confident today. They looked tired, not physically, but something deeper. Tired of holding a story together, tired of being someone he was not. "Today," he whispered, "as always, I will act like a successful man." But the words felt different now, lighter, less convincing, as if even he was starting not to believe them. He left the apartment at 7:30, walked down the stairs, nodded to the same neighbor, stepped into the same street. Everything repeated, but inside him, nothing was exactly the same anymore. When he arrived at the cafe, he looked around before entering. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he was looking for her. He told himself it didn't matter, that yesterday was just a coincidence, that she was just a stranger. But still, his eyes searched. The cafe door opened. The familiar bell rang softly, the smell of coffee wrapped around him, warm, bitter, comforting. He walked to the counter. "Black coffee," he said. The same order, the same voice. But when he turned to find his seat, she was already there, sitting at the same table by the window, looking outside, quiet. He stopped for a second. Not long, just enough to feel something unexpected, relief. He walked toward the table. She noticed him and smiled. "You're here again," she said. He nodded. "As always." He placed his cup down, sat across from her, opened his laptop. But this time, he didn't start typing immediately. "Are you working today?" she asked. He looked at the screen, the empty document, the meaningless tabs, the quiet truth behind the image. Then he looked at her. For a brief moment, he considered saying it. The truth. "I'm not working. I lost my job. I've been pretending." The words were there, clear, simple, ready, but they didn't come out. Instead, he smiled. "Yes," he said. "A busy day." She nodded. "I understand." She didn't question it, didn't look suspicious, just accepted it. And somehow, that made it harder, because now it felt like he was lying to someone kind, someone who didn't deserve it. She took a sip of her drink, a simple tea, light in color, very different from his coffee. "I made a decision last night," she said. He raised his eyes. "Oh?" She nodded. "I'm going to start." He leaned slightly forward. "Start what?" "My business. Even if it's small. Even if it fails." She smiled, a little nervously. "But I don't want to wait anymore." There was a quiet courage in her voice, not loud, not dramatic, but real. And it touched something inside him again. "That's brave," he said. She shook her head. "No. I'm just tired of being stuck." He felt that, deeply. Tired of being stuck. Tired of repeating the same day. Tired of pretending to move forward while standing still. "What about you?" she asked. "What are you working on?" The question came gently, but it landed heavily. He looked at his screen again, at the empty space, at the silent truth. And this time, he didn't answer immediately. Seconds passed, longer than before. long enough for something inside him to begin breaking. Just a little. I, he started, then stopped. His voice felt unfamiliar, like it didn't belong to the role he had been playing. She waited, not pushing, not judging, just present. And in that quiet space, something unusual happened. He didn't feel the need to impress her. He didn't feel the need to protect the image. For the first time in a long time, he felt safe enough to hesitate. I'm figuring things out, he said finally. It wasn't the full truth, but it wasn't a lie either. She smiled softly. That sounds honest. He let out a small breath, almost like relief. They didn't say anything for a while after that. He didn't pretend to type as much, didn't rush to look busy. He just sat there, holding his cup, thinking, feeling, being. It was unfamiliar, but not uncomfortable. After some time, she closed her notebook. I should go, she said. First step today. He nodded. I hope it goes well. She stood up, then paused, looked at him. For what it's worth, she said, I think you're closer than you think. He frowned slightly. To what? She smiled. To whatever it is you're trying to become. Then she picked up her bag and left. The bell rang softly as the door closed behind her. He sat there, still. Her words stayed in the air, soft, but powerful, closer than you think. He looked down at his hands, at his coffee, at his reflection in the dark surface of the cup. For months, he'd been acting, repeating, pretending, believing that one day it might turn into something real, but now he wasn't so sure because something else had started, something quieter, but stronger, not the act of becoming someone else, but the slow beginning of becoming himself. He closed his laptop, earlier than usual, no performance, no need, just silence. And in that silence, a question appeared, simple, clear, and impossible to ignore. What if I stop pretending? He didn't answer it. Not yet. But for the first time, he allowed himself to ask. Outside, the world continued as always, but inside him, something had shifted again. Not dramatically, not completely, but enough. Enough to make the next step possible. And sometimes, change doesn't begin with action. It begins with a question you can no longer avoid. He did not go back to the cafe the next morning. That, in itself, was unusual. For months, his routine had been unbroken, precise, predictable, safe. Wake up, dress well, walk the same streets, sit by the window, pretend. But today, he stayed inside. The clock still said 6:30 when he opened his eyes. The light still touched the wall in the same quiet way. The wind still whispered through the broken window. Nothing outside had changed, but he had made a small decision. He would not perform today. He lay in bed a little longer, not sleeping, just thinking. The question from yesterday returned to him slowly. What if I stop pretending? He repeated it in his mind, again and again. It didn't feel like a dangerous question anymore. It felt honest, but honesty has a cost, and he knew that. If he stopped pretending, he would have to face what was real, the empty days, the silent phone, the uncertainty he'd been avoiding. He sat up, looked around his small apartment. For the first time in a long time, he didn't see it as a temporary place. He saw it as it was, simple, worn, quiet, not a place between success and something better, just his life, as it is. He stood up slowly, but he didn't reach for the iron. He didn't choose his professional shirt. Instead, he picked a simple one, soft, comfortable, slightly wrinkled. He looked at it for a second, then smiled, just a little. It felt strange, but also lighter. He washed his face, brushed his teeth, and stood in front of the mirror again. But this time, he did not say the words. He did not whisper, "I will act like a successful man." He just looked at his own face, at the line under his eyes, at the person who'd been trying so hard to become someone else. "Maybe," he said quietly, "I can just be you today." The words felt unfamiliar, but not wrong. He left the apartment later than usual. The street was busier now, more noise, more movement, less space to hide inside a routine. He walked without a clear destination. No cafe, no performance, just walking. At first, it felt uncomfortable, like something was missing, because for so long, his steps had always been part of a story. Now, they were just steps, real, unplanned. He passed by places he had ignored before, a small bookstore, a quiet park, a narrow street with old trees. He noticed details he had never seen, the way light moved between buildings, the sound of people talking softly, the rhythm of a city that did not know him and did not expect anything from him. He stopped near a bench, sat down, watched people pass, a man on his phone, a woman carrying groceries, a child laughing for no reason. Simple moments, real moments. And for the first time in months, he was part of them. Not as a character, not as a role, but as himself. After some time, his phone vibrated. He looked at it, an unknown number. He hesitated. For a second, his old instinct returned. Ignore it. Stay safe. Stay invisible. But something inside him had changed. He answered. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a voice. "Hi, is this Daniel?" He frowned slightly. "Yes." "This is Martin, from the company." His heart tightened. The company, the place he had not returned to, the place he had avoided in his thoughts. I see," he said. "We've been trying to reach you," the voice continued. "Your email wasn't responding. I wanted to follow up about something." Daniel stood up slowly. His body felt alert now, focused. "Yes," he said. "There's a short-term project," Martin explained. "Nothing permanent yet. But we need someone experienced. You came to mind." Daniel didn't speak immediately. The words felt distant, as if they were meant for someone else, for the version of him that still belonged to that world. "I'm not sure," he said carefully. "I haven't been working recently." "That's okay," Martin replied. "It's a small start. Flexible. Just a few weeks." Daniel looked around, at the street, at the people, at the life that had continued without him. A few weeks. A small start. Not a full return, not a complete solution, just something real. "I'll think about it," he said. "Of course," Martin replied. "I'll send you the details." The call ended. Daniel stood there, holding his phone. For a long moment, he didn't move. This was different from his usual thoughts. This was not imagination, not a performance, not a story he created in his head. This was real, an opportunity, small, uncertain, but real. He sat back down on the bench. His mind was quiet, not rushing, not overthinking, just present. In the past, he would have reacted differently. He would have said yes immediately, trying to prove something, trying to return to the image. Or he would have said no, out of fear, out of doubt. But now, he didn't feel the need to rush, because something important had changed. He was no longer trying to become a successful man. He was trying to become a real one. And real decisions take time. He looked at his reflection in the dark screen of his phone. Not perfect, not confident, but honest. For the first time in a long time, He trusted that. The sun moved slowly across the sky. Time passed, and eventually he stood up again. He didn't go back to the cafe. Not yet. But as he walked through the city, he realized something quietly powerful. He didn't need the performance anymore, because the life he had been pretending to live was starting to find him. Not all at once, not in a dramatic way, but step by step, moment by moment, truth by truth. And maybe that was always the missing piece. Not acting like someone else, but being willing to face who you are, even when it's uncertain, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's not impressive. Because somewhere in that honesty, something real begins to grow. He walked a little slower now, not lost, not pretending, just moving forward, as himself. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The message arrived later that afternoon, a simple email. Short, clear, practical. Details about the project, a timeline, a few expectations. Nothing impressive, nothing overwhelming, just real work. Daniel sat at his small table, reading the message slowly. Once, then again. His laptop screen reflected softly in his eyes. This time, there was no need to pretend he was working, because now he actually was. Not yet fully, not completely committed, but standing at the edge of something real. And that edge felt unfamiliar. Not because it was difficult, but because it required a different kind of courage. And the courage to stop hiding, the courage to try without a perfect image. He leaned back in his chair, looked around his apartment again, the same walls, the same quiet air. But now, it didn't feel like a place he needed to escape from. It felt like a place where something could begin. He closed the laptop, not to avoid it, but to think, slowly, carefully. The old version of him would have reacted quickly. Say yes, take the opportunity, return to the image of success, or say no, avoid the risk, stay in the safety of pretending. But now, he sat in the middle, between fear and hope, between past and possibility, and for the first time, he didn't rush to choose. Evening came quietly. The light outside softened. The sound of the city slowed. And something inside him settled, not completely, but enough. He opened his laptop again, read the email one more time. Then he began to type. Not a perfect answer, not a confident performance, just an honest response. Thank you for reaching out. I haven't been working recently, but I'm interested in trying. I may need some time to adjust, but I'm willing to do my best. He paused, read the words. They were simple, maybe even uncertain, but they were true. And that mattered more now. He pressed send, and just like that, something shifted again. A quiet step forward, not dramatic, not visible to the world, but deeply real to him. He sat there for a while, not thinking, not planning, just feeling. The kind of feeling that doesn't need words, a mix of fear and relief, uncertainty and calm. The next morning, he woke up before the alarm, not because he had to, but because something inside him was ready. The room was still quiet, the light still soft, but today, there was a difference, a reason, a small one, but real. He stood up, made his bed, not carefully, not perfectly, just normally. He chose his clothes without thinking too much. Not the successful version, not the safe version, just something that felt like him. When he stood in front of the mirror, he paused again. This moment had always been important, the place where the performance began. But today, there was no script, no line to repeat, no role to play. He looked at himself, and for the first time in a long time, He didn't try to change what he saw. He simply nodded, a quiet acknowledgement. I'm here, he said softly, and that was enough. He left the apartment, walked down the stairs, and stepped into the street, but instead of heading nowhere, he had a direction, not a big destination, just a small workspace the company had arranged. Temporary, simple, real. The walk felt different today, not faster, not more confident, but grounded. Each step had meaning, not because it looked good, but because it was real. When he arrived, he stood outside the building for a moment. It wasn't impressive. No glass walls, no modern design. Just a normal place, with normal people, doing normal work. And for a second, he felt something familiar. Doubt. A quiet voice inside him said, "You're not ready. You've been away too long. You're not the person you pretended to be." He listened, didn't fight it, didn't ignore it, just heard it. Then he took a breath, slow, steady, and answered, and quietly, "Maybe I'm not ready, but I'm here." He opened the door, walked inside. The air was different. Not like the cafe, not like his apartment. It smelled like work, papers, computers, movement. A few people looked up briefly, then returned to their tasks. No one stared. No one expected anything from him. And somehow, that made it easier. He introduced himself. Simple words, no performance, no exaggeration, just his name, just his presence. They showed him his desk, small, clean, enough space for a laptop and a notebook. He sat down, placed his hands on the table. For a moment, he didn't move. This was it. Not the life he had imagined, not the image he had tried to create, but something real, something he could touch, something he could build. He opened his laptop, read the task. Simple instructions, clear expectations, nothing impossible, just work. He began slowly, carefully, not trying to impress, not trying to prove anything, just doing it. Minutes passed, then an hour, then more, and something unexpected happened. He didn't feel like he was pretending. He didn't feel like he was acting. He felt present, focused, engaged, the way he used to feel, before everything changed, before he lost himself in an image. At some point, he leaned back in his chair, looked at the screen, at the progress he had made, small but real. He smiled, not proudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, honest smile. Later that day, as he walked home, he passed by the cafe. He slowed down, looked through the window. The same tables, the same light, the same space where he had spent so many mornings pretending. He saw his old seat by the window, empty, waiting. For a moment, he thought about going in, sitting there again, opening his laptop, returning to the comfort of that routine. But then, he shook his head gently. Not today, not anymore. Because that place had been important. It had helped him survive. It had given him structure, a sense of identity, even if it wasn't real. But now, he didn't need it the same way, because the life he had been rehearsing was no longer just a story. It was beginning, in small steps, in honest moments, in imperfect actions. He continued walking, past the cafe, into the evening, into something new. And as the light slowly faded, one quiet realization stayed with him. He had spent so long trying to look like a successful man, but real change didn't come from looking the part. It came from showing up, even when you're unsure, even when you're not ready, even when the image is gone. Because in that space, between who you were and who you are becoming, something real begins to grow, not perfectly, not quickly, but honestly. And this time, He wasn't pretending anymore. Days began to take on a new shape. Not perfect, not smooth, but real. Daniel woke up each morning at 6:30, just as he always had. But now, the reason was different. He no longer woke up to perform. He woke up to begin. The apartment was still small, still quiet, still imperfect. The windows still didn't close properly. The wind still whispered at night. But something inside him had changed. The space no longer felt like a place he was stuck in. It felt like a place he was growing from. He moved through his mornings more simply now. No careful performance, no perfect routine, just small actions. Making his bed, washing his face, drinking a cup of coffee he actually liked. Not black, not bitter, just warm and honest. When he walked to work, he no longer tried to look like someone important. He just walked, sometimes slowly, sometimes with quiet thoughts, sometimes noticing nothing at all. And that was enough. The temporary job was not impressive. There were no big titles, no important meetings, no one watching him closely. But there was something more valuable. There was truth. Each task he completed was real. Each small problem he solved was real. Each hour he spent focused was real. And slowly, something began to return. Not confidence, not yet, but trust. Trust in himself. Trust that he could still think, still work, still move forward. It didn't come all at once. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when doubt returned quietly, when he looked at others around him and felt behind, when he remembered how long he had been lost, when the voice inside him whispered again, "You wasted time. You fell behind. You are not where you should be." And on those days, he didn't fight the voice. He didn't try to silence it. He simply listened and then answered gently, "I'm here now." Not perfect, not ahead, but present, and that was enough. One afternoon, as he was finishing his work, he received another message. This time, it was from her, the woman from the cafe. He stared at the name for a moment. He didn't even realize they had exchanged contacts. But somehow, it felt natural. The message was simple. "How is your week going?" He smiled slightly, not because the question was special, but because it was real. He replied slowly, "Different." A few seconds passed. Then another message appeared. "That sounds like a good thing." He thought about that. Different. Yes, not easier, not more comfortable, but better. "I think it is," he wrote. She responded again. "I started to." He leaned back in his chair. "Your business?" he asked. "Yes. It's small. It's messy. I don't know what I'm doing." He smiled. He understood that feeling, more than she probably knew. "But I feel alive," she added. He read that sentence twice. Alive. Such a simple word, but it carried something deep. For a long time, he had not felt that. He had felt safe, controlled, hidden, but not alive. "I think that matters more than knowing everything," he replied. She sent a small, laughing emoji. "Maybe we're both beginners," she said. He looked at the screen, at the words, at the quiet connection between two people who were not pretending. "Maybe," he answered. They didn't say much more after that, but the conversation stayed with him. Light, simple, honest. And as he walked home that evening, he noticed something else. The city felt different again, not because it had changed, but because he had. The same streets, the same sounds, the same movement. But now, he felt part of it, not as someone watching from the outside, not as someone trying to fit into an image, but as someone living inside it, step by step, moment by moment. Later that night, he sat by the window. The broken frame still let the wind in. The soft sound still filled the room. But now, it didn't feel lonely. It felt familiar, like a quiet reminder of where he had been. He thought about the past months, the long days in the cafe, the careful routines, the silent pretending. At the time, it had felt necessary, like the only way to survive. And maybe it was, because even though it wasn't real, it had kept something inside him alive. A small belief, a quiet hope that one day things could change, and now they had. Not in a dramatic way, not suddenly, but slowly, gently, honestly. He picked up his phone again, opened his messages, looked at the conversation with her, then paused, thinking not about what to say, but about something deeper. For the first time in a long time, he felt ready, ready to stop hiding completely, ready to let someone see the truth. He typed slowly, carefully. I want to tell you something. He stopped, read the sentence, then continued. I haven't been honest about my situation. His fingers hesitated for a moment. The old fear returned, the fear of being seen, the fear of being judged, the fear of losing the image. But then he remembered something. There was no image anymore, only him, and that was enough. He continued typing. I lost my job months ago. I've been pretending for a long time. I didn't know how to say it. He looked at the message. It felt heavy, but also freeing. He pressed send, and then he waited, not nervously, not anxiously, just openly. Minutes passed. The wind moved softly through the room. The city outside grew quieter, and then his phone vibrated, a new message. He looked at the screen, took a slow breath, and opened it. Thank you for telling me. That was all. No judgment, no surprise, no questions, just acceptance. His shoulders relaxed. A tension he didn't even know he was holding began to fade. Another message appeared. We all start somewhere. And sometimes we start again. He smiled, not because everything was solved, not because life had become easy, but because something important had happened. He was no longer pretending, not at the cafe, not at work, not with himself, and not with others. He placed his phone down, looked out the window, at the quiet night, at the world moving gently forward. And for the first time, he didn't feel like he was chasing a version of himself. He felt like he was becoming one, slowly, imperfectly, but truly. And maybe that was what success really looked like. Not the image, not the performance, not the perfect story, but the quiet courage to be honest, to begin again, to keep going, even when you don't have everything figured out. Because in the end, it wasn't the pretending that changed his life. It was the moment he finally stopped.